And that was the big take to me personally from Dr. Curry's presentation. It's up to you. What do you want to do? You know, there are options for everything.
So my takeaway from that was short-term and long-term. Short-term, because even if we were to approve a burying the power line project tomorrow, it's many years away. So from a short-term perspective, I think his takeaway was vegetation management policy. We need to establish a vegetation management policy to deal with trimming the vegetation around the power lines, because apparently there's a disconnect between what we can and cannot do with or without FPL assessing the activity of a line. Because when I asked the question, if there's a vegetation around a pole, you got to wait for FPL to come out and temporarily turn off the power to remove the vegetation. It just didn't sound right. So I think for the short term, we should explore the vegetation management issues. For the long term, as far as undergrounding the power line goes, my thoughts there is really, what can we afford? I mean, we have to establish a more effective debt management policy. I brought this up last time. We can't. It's not just digging a trench and burying the power line. It's not that simple. It is enormously expensive. The town is already in debt, $17 million. We have a $600,000 a year debt service that on the water sewer project, and this would double that. So, and that's fine if the town is willing to pay for it. If the town is willing to pay for it, then we can figure out a way to do it. But I think that from a fiscal policy perspective, we need to have a better handle on what the debt management policy should be. In our budget, the last budget book, we did have a sheet for the first time, actually, which I was pleased to see, a debt management policy. But in reading texts on debt management policies for municipal government, there's lots of ways to slice and dice what's an appropriate debt management policy for a given municipality, and it's all sorts of formulas. So I without getting into the specifics of that, I think we should establish what can we afford. Can we afford $10 million? Can we afford $20 million? Because it's at least a $20 million project. And there's probably a whole bunch of different ways to finance it, and we can easily be creative on doing that. But I think that the bottom line is, how much can we afford? Because if we find out that we can't afford a $20 million project for whatever reason, well, then there's, as Dr. Curry did say, there are alternative hardening strategies that we can look at if we just can't do undergrounding the power line. I think we can do it. But I think that we need to get a better handle on what the appropriate debt level that a town like us should have, and how it's paid for. Do you throw it onto the tax bill? Do you do bank loans? I mean, there's millage rate equivalents. So I think that we need to have an intelligent conversation about what an appropriate debt management policy is for us for the long term. The short term, I think we should direct the staff to come up with a vegetation management policy. Dr. Curry had mentioned that there's some templates already available, and we should have better coordination with FPL if that's what it takes to do it. Because otherwise, every little breeze, you're going to have a power outage somewhere. So that's my thoughts on the undergrounding part. Vegetation management, number one.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense. My take on Dr. Curry's talk was exactly what the manager said, that it's really up to us what we want to do. My take from the audience was that, yes, people want the utilities underground, but maybe that's more of a long-term thing. And in the short term, aside from the vegetation management, I think would be wise to identify the hot spots we have, because with a storm, you never know which areas are going to be hit harder, because sometimes properties get the power back right away, sometimes they don't. But in this past storm, we've definitely identified certain hotspot areas that, the power kept going out. And if we could think of, so you have the short term of vegetation management, the midterm or closer to short term of maybe
getting a better handle on debt management policy.
Well, new lines, maybe new poles, or maybe underground the hotspot areas.
But that gets into a lot more complexity when you have a mix of it. And to take advantage of the FPL credits, you need an all or none type of policy. Okay. So that either we do it or we don't do it. That's really what we have to decide.
So we can't do it in phases.
Well, the project will be in phases, but
not.
Not this
aluminum
part's going to
poles are
undergrounded and this
composite.
part's not going to be undergrounded.
Not a hybrid.
Because, well, the other thing too is that with a lot of, like, for instance, someone does a tear down of a house, can we mandate them to put the lines?
You still have the above ground supply lines, so
Right.
that's not going to make a difference.
But yes, there's going to be a whole host of things that are brought forward as sustainability initiatives, and one of them should be putting the electric feed underground.
Yeah, because they're in that situation if they're, okay.
Mr. Mayor, while you were up, the manager talked about his thoughts about the undergrounding, and I articulated my thoughts were short-term vegetation management, long-term debt management. What can we afford? Better understanding of that.
Well, I mean, part of it, and we talked a bit about it, touched on it during the last budget hearing, that when we first prepared the 5-year financial forecast, it was to lay out the strategic trajectory, the vision of the town, how we're going to be able to afford the kinds of projects that are really transformational. And we've gone through a lot of pain, and we're now starting to reap the benefits. What I hope the residents understand is that during the difficult economic times, the town was essentially cut to the bone, and we're still dealing with some of those elements. I want to mention the ERP, but I just did. Right? Structurally, there's so many improvements that we need to do, but I think that we're starting to turn the corner, and we certainly have the tax base that's increasing. So we're going to be, I think we're at that point that if we don't start planning for the big projects now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think one of the first things to do is how much money can we have available to us, because the project is not going to be inexpensive.
Correct.
So I think that.
Well, we know it's more than $10
we already
million.
know. I mean, I've already articulated the pros and cons. There's lots of them. We'll get into that later.
But you're right. Part of it is education. We have to make sure, we have to do our best to help people understand that this is not the solution. Right?
Another project for the PIO.
But this doesn't solve every problem. There are trade-offs with everything. If you ask some of the communities that are underground why they lost power, well, the feed to them was interrupted. So if there's no power flowing to them, it doesn't matter where your lines are.
Right.
So it's not a panacea. But it could be transformational. And having a substation here and having the density that we do, it bodes well.
So what about the short term, though? Because and thank you for. I know that we have your next item up. Your urging resolution. I think it's great. But what do we do now for the short term? Because when I was asking the manager about what are we allowed to do in terms of on our own to deal with vegetation management, not have to wait for FPL.
Well,
so what can we do?
That's part of the impetus for having the after-action review, a conversation with the community. And that's what I read into the record at the beginning of the meeting. Folks have an expectation that we provide cable, that we provide phone, that we provide power, and other essential services that are in fact provided by third parties. So then there's a frustration if those services are lost, if the town isn't fighting for them. So most residents get it, but there has to be an explanation for those homes that have power on Abbott, between Abbott and Harding on the southern side of town, and actually I think in your property as well, where the power lines, the utility lines are in between the homes. The town doesn't have the authority to go in and maintain that vegetation. That's on private property. I mean, the manager, I'm sure, will attest to my weekly meetings where I go over nits and gnats, and for weeks we talked about the town driving the streets and identifying all the trees, all the vegetation that's in the right-of-way, or that's interfering with the utility lines, determine whether it's in the right-of-way or on private property, and then engage with FP&L so that they add it to their list of, and they did, but we gave them a much longer list than what FPL accepted as their responsibility.
Yeah, because I have a pole that's filled with vegetation behind my property.
Yeah.
It's surrounded by 4 neighbors.
Yeah.
I talked to my landscaper to try to cut it back, and he won't touch it.
But rightfully so. But that's one of that's why I framed the discussion on November 1st the way that I did. You're right. We have to communicate what is our responsibility, what is others, and then how to deal with it.
But getting back to this particular agenda item
Yes.
about the take-home message from undergrounding, I think for the short term, we should look at vegetation management policies and how we can implement that. We'll continue to work, parallel track the undergrounding, but I think for the short term, because underground is not going to happen for quite some time, even if we prove it tomorrow.
But I'd like to start moving forward. So a question for the manager is, how do we start the conversation? We're not at the point now that we can go to FP&L and ask for a binding estimate. Hopefully the Public Service Commission, through their actions, might make them a gruff benefit. Right? Remember the 25% kick in from FP&L. Whether it looks like that may change. I mean, if you read the recent articles, newspaper articles that quote FP&L, it seems like they're thinking that burying utility lines is a benefit to them. So maybe with communities like us, individuals, hitting the Florida Public Service Commission with our desire for more help, right? This should be part of the hardening plan. Maybe there could be additional savings to us. But in terms of starting the process, when, how, and maybe I don't need the answer now, but that's what's really going to kick us off.
That's one of the issues. And in my conversations with FP&L representatives, I said, Guillermo, we're not in the tree trimming business. We're in the business of delivering power, right? The property owner has a responsibility. The town has a responsibility. And I said, I accept the responsibility. And then the conversation starts, obviously, on the tangents. Whose tree is it? Is it in my right of way? Is it the type of conversation. Obviously, the management, it's a kind of a pre-treatment, right? Don't let it reach the wires. So that should be the policy. Don't reach anything, reach the wires. Whether it's in private property, public property, wherever it is, don't let the branches reach or get close, because some of those wires are so powerful that you get close to it and you get zapped. So, whether it's 5 feet or not.
So what do we do today? I mean, we're in this, without...
Today, we have an inventory. We had it like a month ago or 2 months ago of everything that we saw as we drove around, as Public Works drove around, identified what was in contact with wires, right? That we need a coordination of FP&L or somebody, a contractor from FP&L that is authorized to say, that's hot, that's not hot, that's hot, that's hot, that's not hot. And we can then engage into that. Now, as an administrator, I'm going to tell you, well, some of the things are going to be borne by the property owners, because many of those trees are on property or were planted by somebody, wasn't planted by the town, and as you know, with the sidewalk conversation, no, that's my land. You can't touch it. It's public right away. So we either
You're not getting it back.
not appropriate the public right away, but say if we're responsible for it, then I got to come back with a budget amendment and say, listen, we need $100,000, $200,000 to be maintaining that constantly throughout the year. Because we got to pay somebody. We're not going to have somebody employed by the town with a bucket going around trimming anything.
But we can have that conversation on November 1st.
That's
right? Because I'm sure the residents are going to say, town, it's your responsibility.
Yes.
Or FPL, it's your responsibility. And even if it's FPL's responsibility, town, it's still your responsibility. So we need to be prepared to tell what we did, how we did it, why we did it, and what residents should do going forward. So to me, that's the right venue. But going back to the undergrounding, how do we move that forward?
Well, and I think Commissioner Carrigan hit it right, the nail on the head. It's an economic issue. It's a financial issue. We have a certain capacity through issuance of bonds, but it's the willingness of the property owners to tax themselves to pay for the undergrounding. It's not the panacea, because remember, we are part of a network. And if we underground and Miami Beach does an underground, those wires come from Miami Beach. I mean, we got regional wires. If they break, we're out of luck. We're going to be brown or black, because it can be a mile down the road. So it's the system, and it's a regional system that has to be addressed. And I think that's some of the messages that we got to take to Tallahassee and the Public Service Commission. That it's a statewide system.
Yeah, because I would hate to, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I would hate to have to make the investment when the weakest link is our next door neighbor. And so we'll end up with the same outages if the outage or the breakage occurs.
Or substation.
Yeah.
Then what I would suggest is we direct the manager to start conversations with FP&L and put together a white paper on the pros and cons. Right, utilize the information from the workshop last month, and frame it out as a policy. Give us the policy decisions, time frame, so that we have a roadmap for how we move forward. And I guess I would also go back to what we've done previously, because we've already been down this road, and we got to the point of making an up or down vote on the binding proposal, and unfortunately the vote was no. So maybe dust that off and validate those same steps from FP&L. And then the next step is, if the commission wants to move forward, then we proceed with requesting a binding estimate from.
But I think in
FP&L.
parallel, we still need to get a better handle on the debt management policy.
Yeah.
We need to better understand what we can afford.
Sure.
Not going to be done but for free. We're going to have to pay for it in some way.
Which is fine.
That was actually my thoughts, is that I would hate for us to run through the debt management and fund this whole thing when possibly there's government money out there for this, because it is statewide, because you have our neighbors that have the same issues. So perhaps,
Right, but that's wishful thinking. I mean,
I don't know, though, and maybe FPO, because they're charging us for it anyways, maybe they would absorb the cost.
well, we already know that there's 25% on the table, but we still need to know.
We need more.
that we're not going to get it for free.
No,
right?
we're not. But if they do the outlay of it, and then
So again,
Yeah.
using a white paper, a concept, maybe one recommendation is engage a qualified financial professional to look at our financial condition and do an affordability study so that we understand what the impact may be.
Let me add to that, though. If we're going to dust off the old figures, we've got to remember that there are other providers, not just FP&L.
No, I don't was talking about the old figures in terms of the estimates. It was the old process.
The process, right. So don't we have to engage in that same process with the other providers, with the cable providers, and verify that their process remained the same?
Yeah.
AT&T, and so forth.
Well, what I wanted to see first is a roadmap. This is how a project would be accomplished. These are the steps. And then, so let's do this in bite-sized pieces. We found, even though it doesn't always result in a project, it makes it a little bit easier to message, easier to understand as a policy body, and easier to message within the community. These are the steps. We're not making any decisions. We're gathering information. This is the first step. This is the second step. This is the third step. And then we get to a decision.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to add is I've learned throughout my career, but have recently again confirmed, that the best way to get FP&L to do anything is to go to the Public Service Commission.
Okay. That brings us to item
Right.
9.
As part of the direction that we give the manager on this item, what I'd like to have him consider is whether we ought to engage more with Public Service Commission on this particular strategy. And fast, right.
Certainly should be part
That's
of it.
what I think our lobbyists should be tasked with, is starting to make some noise at that level, lobby at that level, and starting to engage our neighbors in Miami Beach in kind of piggybacking on some of those efforts I'm sure that they're going to be making.
Yeah.
Who's running for mayor over there?
Gelber. Dan Gelber's having an event, like a movie night coming up in the North Shore, open space, not North Shore, the band shell, coming up in a week or two.
Okay. We're good for now?
I am.
Okay. Item 9H?
Motion to approve.
Okay. Well, let me just give a little background.
You had to, I know.
Yeah.
9G?
Oh, 9G. Let's go to that first.
What is that one?
It's another verbal.
It's the lot, the bank lot, which is at the 96th Street intersection with Collins. It's a good thing that I had a witness. We made a call, Duncan and I made a call to the bank's representative who owns the lot, and he said upwards of $2 million. And I said, would you consider donation? Then I said, well, you're talking about $2 million. And he corrected me and said, no. I said upwards of $2 million. I don't think I'd like to see who made that assessment. If there's he says that they commissioned somebody to evaluate the property, but with property's value to what you can do on it. There's nothing you can do on it. It's valuable. Probably if the shul bought the hotel and that property, or the hotel bought that property, so they can assemble something. But by itself, even to us, it'll be a cost of maintenance. Even if they gave it to us as a park, we'd have to maintain it. It's at the north end of the town. It's
If
not
we used
centrally
artificial
located.
grass, the maintenance requirements would go way
There you
down.
go. There you go. But it actually becomes a liability even. So that's why I was serious about telling the guy, would you consider a donation for it? So obviously I wouldn't pay $2 million. I wouldn't pay $1 million. I don't know how low I would go. How low I would go. But and I've done valuations of property here in Venezuela and in other countries, and it's not supported. A price of over $300,000 is not supported by what you can do on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Good. So I presume that you left it. If you change your mind, we'll still be here.
Give us a ring.
Okay, good.
Meanwhile, you got to grass that lot
Yes.
and maintain it for us.
And the clock is ticking. All right. 9H. So,
Motion to approve.
okay. It was an idea that came out of next door. Somebody said, why isn't the town advocating for the Public Service Commission? So it made sense. A good idea is a good idea. I would add, though, that just as the town has a voice with the Public Service Commission, I think it's appropriate that we utilize our lobbyists. So, Mr. Manager, if you could reach out to Mr. Gomez and ask him to carry this message. I would like to also ask each resident, take the time to contact the Public Service Commission, the web link, very easy to do, and let them know. So this is available in the agenda package. There'll be a resolution, if it's approved, on the town website, and they can really just parrot the same information. So just as the town is a customer of FP&L, each resident is a customer of FP&L, and it's a small act that each of us can take. It's a good idea, something that we can all do, to send the message that we need the Public Service Commission to understand that they have a role and responsibility. We rely on them to be our agency looking out for us with these matters, and want them to go above and beyond what they've already done. So I appreciate the support. If there's a second, I think that...
I'll second, but I think Dan did initially, so.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, very good.
I noticed in the course of my research on that issue that our local senator, Campbell, sits on an oversight board that basically approves legislation that comes before it relating to FP&L and the Public Service Commission. Just a thought. I don't know if that's something we want to leverage, or the timing might not be right.
I accept. If you're volunteering to go and speak with Senator Campbell, that would be awesome.
Return my phone calls or emails. So
You have to text her that your power's off. The timing might not be right.
Okay. Okay.
I just
Understood.
wanted to point it out, that she sits in that capacity.
Okay. Good to know, good to know. And I just want to express my appreciation to our town attorney's office, that worked pretty quickly to crank out this resolution and had some independent research that enhanced it. So, thank you. There are 4 items that were pulled from the consent agenda. If we could just take those. The first one is on page 10 of our agenda package. So it is a Scrivener's error. So we are going to rescind the title of building official for Mr. Stokes and restore him to Public
Thank
Works
you.
Director. But see, the good news is that somebody reads the minutes. I think everybody's caught something at one point or another. The next one is on page 20. Mr. Manager, on the information technology, we previously spoke about it, but for the benefit of the commission, if you could verify that the video feed from the upgrades meets the standards of AT&T, and then see if AT&T will then carry our public access channel on UVerse, that would be a great benefit.
Okay.
And on page 23, I was not able to find the email, Mr. Manager. This is related to the traffic mitigation program, but I just want to call it out that a resident had advised me that there is a county designation, or at least there is in other states, that is then communicated with the various mapping companies, so it would not be directing vehicles through Surfside Street. So I just need to find that email.
An email address for the...
No, it was an email from a resident that had the information
Of who to contact for these...
of a story about a community that was able to do that, I believe, is my recollection. It was some time ago, and I'm running, if anybody sent me an email and I have not responded, I'm running about 300 behind, which is pretty good. I'll do my best to get back. But I know that we've sent a demand letter.
There's no way to send it. I remember talking to Attorney Miller about this. You just can't find it.
Let me find the reference, and if I can't find it, I'll just go back to that person and get the information. And I will ask the clerk to distribute it to everybody so you can see what it is. And then, Commissioner Carrigan, on page 26, you had an item on C-Click Fix.
Yeah. On this item, my understanding is that we have CGA working on an updated new website, and one of the features will be a report a problem type functionality, which will render C-Click Fix moot. I mean, there's no love lost between me and that piece of software. I think it's rather defectively designed. Defectively, that's not a word. But the way that program is designed from a behavioral perspective, people have this expectation of instant responses, and because the way it's designed, and they're not getting it, so I think it's just increasing people's frustration for the users of that particular software. And in terms of how it's used, we're paying about $5,500 a year for about 80 people that are using it, and really not even 80 people. There's 141 registered users in Surfside. Only about 80 or so have actually used it, and then even a smaller number actually use it with any degree of frequency. And I think that it frustrates a lot of people. Again, the way it's designed, it sort of gives a resident the feedback that something's going to happen instantaneously. The mayor always has to tell people how to use it. And so I just want to let people know my preference is that we not renew our license agreement with them, and especially now that the new website's going to have the appropriate functionality to replace it. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. So,
but our former building official is all trained up on C-Click Fix.
Well, he's going to spend the next 3 nights so that you know.
I could agree with that, depending on what our new system has, because I was hopeful that our new system will incorporate where you sign up and get the text message alerts.
Yeah, well, that's standard. So I had extensive conversations about where we are with the website. We're still a little bit away, but I saw on the list of features and functions, they'll have all the standard subscription services and all that. That's standard, and there's also going to be one of these report a problem type of
Get on the mic.
functions.
Right, well, then we wouldn't need this.
And it's going to be mobile friendly, so, which is another reasons why we're doing it in the first place. So-
One outside of that, one point of privilege. I want our Public Works Director to explain to you the next 3 nights that he's going to spend here testing a number of things that, so that they work for the
Now, Randy, look this way. Come on, man.
Come on, Randy.
We have to do a drawdown test with CGA for the next 3 nights on our sewer lift stations. Randy Stokes, Public Works Director. Yes, thank you.
I heard you got a promotion.
Yeah, well, and I got fired tonight, so
No, but so you appreciate, and this guy, I bet you that he spends the night doing that, and tomorrow he shows up at some point during the day to keep on working, and then it's the next night and the next night after that, so that you appreciate the quality of staff that we have. And it's not only him. It's partly CGA, but some of our folks.
it's
are gonna
my
be
staff too.
We know we got a great team.
Okay. Well,
I was coming home from a dinner one night on Friday night. It's like 11:30, 11:45. I'm walking up Harding. There's Randy. I think he was like painting something. Like working out there, no problem.
He's also a graffiti artist.
Right.
All right.
well, I just want to thank everybody, not only our staff, but my colleagues. We moved through these matters. Considering we started late, we're finishing much earlier. So I want to thank you for the diligence and knocking this out. I think it was another good night for Surfside.
Okay, just got a quick question of my colleagues. Do any of you think it would be worthwhile for us to have the clerk send us a calendar of the PSC's public hearings so that we can start becoming aware of when they consider certain things and when are good times for us to potentially send a representative to their public hearings?
I think we should probably still work through Fausto, get his perspective on it first. I mean, the information's fine, but from a coordination and strategy.
Right, strategy we should definitely hear from Fasto, but just in terms of getting calendars distributed to us so we know when stuff is coming up on their agenda.
Is that easy to
That's,
do?
Agendas are published.
Through the
Published.
manager, of course, because she
Right.
doesn't work for us.
I'm going to send the clerk an email now that has a link.
Tuesday, we're meeting with Mr. Gomez.
Very good. So please address it then. Is there a motion to adjourn?
There is.
Is there a
Second.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Mayor, I need a motion to accept the pulled items from the consent agenda.
Is there a motion? Let's rescind the motion to adjourn. Is there
Do
a
it.
motion to accept the 4 pulled items?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Is there a motion to adjourn?
so move great?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.